Oh, you're coming up with me. I meant to introduce you. You're meant to run up after me.
I was ordered by
Claire. It's like
Claire.
the Queen. I like Prince Philip walking behind. So look, in the introduction, I'm going to go straight for it. Jolyon mentioned what he described as the next 10 years as being highly consequential, which for any Americans in the audience is a lovely example, actually, of British understatement. I think we're at the pointy end of quite a lot of crisis at the moment. We're looking at environmental, geopolitical, societal, existential. We could go on, Tim. Give us hope. What can the BBC, what can PSB more generally do to help?
Thank you for that cheery introduction. I'm going to go down before we go up, yeah, which is, I think the first thing is we need to recognise we're in a crisis. Because I think in our lifetimes we've had a fairly good run. I think we've had a situation where our institutions have broadly worked. We're not used to crisis. And I think we're not used to intervening at speed and making serious choices about what kind of society we want. It's fascinating what we heard earlier, which is, you know, half of so-called young people want younger people not to have social media. So I think we are at a point where there is clear amber-red flashing lights. And also ahead of us, the societal change is very profound. I mean, this so-called revolution of AI and tech, we're all excited by, but it will mean a huge displacement in jobs. It means blue-collar, white-collar work being reshaped. What human beings are doing in a week is going to change. And you don't have to be a kind of tech evangelist to get there. It's pretty straightforward. The question is, can you navigate from A to B in a way which maintains social cohesion, can maintain trust, which is the speech I gave a couple of weeks ago, which I am concerned about deeply, because I think that is the glue that holds us together.
So let me interrupt you. Talk on trust about your Zelensky trip, because I do want you to get that in and explain what role the BBC plays in his world. Let's face it, extraordinary, different, threatening, you know, proper issues he faces. How does the BBC help with that?
Yeah, shall I just get
Am I not allowed to interrupt?
Yes. The point was, we can intervene, and we can talk about that in a minute. I want to get to a little bit of optimism, James. Come on. And I think we can choose. It's flipping our society. In the UK, we can decide to do things on education, public service media, the prominence we give to them, how we do a digital switchover, how we use technologies. The people in this room can decide what they shape. They are not simply victims. And that's the optimism. Talking of which, you know, I was very privileged to be in Kyiv last week, which puts it in perspective. And the reason I was there was obviously our Ukrainian services been there bravely. I mean, the thing is, in my life, people often, as I've said, you know, look at you quite simply, how are you doing? Are you all right? Latest crisis, etc. And we serve them up on a regular basis. But they're all relative. Versus, I mean, the bravery is just straightforward. The bravery, the resilience, and that real deep kind of will to do the right thing was incredible. I mean, and you know, the World Service is there. We've got Steve Rosenberg, which many of you have seen, bravely going through into Moscow doing those reports. It is really important. We're seeing a flood of disinformation. Thousands and thousands of videos being flooded onto social media platforms. Where do people go for things they can trust? And we've got to fight for that. We've got to keep the prominence of that. And that, weirdly, I've never felt more optimism. I've never felt more fired up about the BBC's role. I've never felt we're more needed in terms of trusted media, local storytelling. We're doing all right. Our numbers are good at the moment. Yeah. The issue is, if we currently drift in the way we're doing now, we will be in crisis. End of, in terms of the public service broadcasters and where we're at. And we need to make some quick decisions now around areas like prominence, protection of IP, to Dana's point. You know, we need to protect our national IP. That's where the value is. So these things need to happen fast. The BBC can play a role. We need to decide if we're going to invest in things like the World Service, which to me is a no-brainer. For what it's worth, I get general acceptance of that argument. The issue is cash is hard to find. So I think these are the choices we've got to make in the room. Digital transition, there's a lot of telecoms executives. How are we going to make that happen?
So
don't get me started. Yeah.
So obviously, I mean, I'm not going to be forgiven by this audience if I don't ask you about the charter renewal.
Of course.
And I assume that part of the next 10 years of the BBC is about it being stable and reliable, and all of those rather dull things that are required to make change happen. What is your best outcome? What does it look like?
When you say stable and reliable, I think our values are stable and reliable, but we absolutely are innovating like crazy.
I don't mean stable meaning inert. I mean stable, if you're a business person, you need stability to plan.
Yeah, without
Planning
doubt.
is important.
And one of the things that, what success looks like is, firstly, let's just go through what we see as a successful charter very quickly. One is independence of government in terms appropriately, so not in terms of the funding mechanic, but editorial independence. These things are sacrosanct. Around the world, we're seeing 75% of the world doesn't even have a free press now. We're seeing increased interference. In the initial research we're doing with audiences, I'll tell you, independence, really important. Your point, absolutely right. Long-term stability, warming to the theme, and a ability to plan long-term so that we can, look at the overall creative industries, invest for the long term in a way we're very privileged to. That's the second thing. The third thing is proper funding, but in my view, that is based on value to audiences. You know, since I took over the BBC, the plea for the BBC is not a defensive one saying, aren't we good people? The plea here is 80%, 84% last year of Brits use the BBC every week, 94% a month. They're the big numbers. It's not just a pitch of a market failure organisation where the coalition of the enlightened in a small group go and watch high quality output. It is a society. So I want a funding mechanic that everyone, and it can feel a bit awkward but actually from a societal intervention, I want to justify the value to every household, and I want that protected. I think there is reform in terms of, potentially the scope of the licence fee, how progressive it is, and we can always debate the enforcement question. We're up for reform. I do not want the same system exactly to the letter again. I want reform because the market's changing. But I do want universal funding, and I want proper investment and not begrudging, kind of grinding cuts to the BBC, which we've had the last 10 years, which is just not helped. I think our teams are doing an amazing job. We're innovating like crazy. I'm making a lot of changes in the BBC, but we need help to do that.
And as part of that, so the government has obviously identified the creative sector generally as a growth engine.
Indeed.
Something to be very proud of. I don't think there'll be many people in the sector who would disagree with that. We are proud.
Yeah.
But it is tough. And at a time of economic, uncertainty generally, growth is difficult. What role does the BBC play, so as a self-interested producer, let me ask you that question, in helping producers and helping that bigger sector, and actually sometimes your other PSB partners, frankly, to grow? Because one of the things I noticed in your Salford speech is there's a lot of chat, which I thought was really cool, about partnership.
Totally.
So talk a bit about growth, talk a bit about partnership. I think those two things are probably interrelated.
If you look at the future, and I looked at the levers we can pull in that speech to get growth, your first question about optimism, and the BBC can be highly catalytic. And we've got some experience of this, in terms of the businesses you're running and others. We should be incredibly proud. What we shouldn't do, to your point, is rest on our laurels. And what the BBC can do, there's loads of levers we can pull. Firstly, we can spend with a lot of companies like yours and make sure money is flowing out of the BBC. Then, geographically, I think you've seen the work we've done. I'm very bullish in terms of the work we've done over the last few years. I've been very pushy in terms of pushing money out of London. So if you go to Birmingham and you see, the Silent Witness set, MasterChef there, we can start the ball rolling and build these hubs of excellence. I think they need to be world-class, by the way. So Manchester is a world-class hub in terms of children's output, other things. So we can do a lot there. We can flow our money through the BBC. We've got compelling statistics about, for every pound the BBC, £2.63 is generated for the broader economy. I think that's what the BBC is venture capital for the UK in that way. What's fascinating about the BBC in some ways is it's venture capital, but it's also based on value for every household. So if you get it right, and believe me, we get lots of feedback on how we're doing, welcome to my inbox, and navigating that in the culture wars and all the exhaustion of that, but I think we're doing a reasonable job of holding the line and then flowing the money back and turbocharging the industry. What I do need, and I think you're warm to that, is some of the things we've talked about in terms of IP protection. Come on, let's get on with it. Digital transition I talked about. I don't want to be dragged to digital transition. I want us to plan it. I want to make sure people are not left behind. I want everyone to have the benefit of digital transition, not be, begrudging about it. Why don't we lead? So the BBC can play a massive role in that with Freely and supporting that. People trust us, believe it or not. Our trust grew last year. We can talk to them about that digital transition. If people, single households, older people, they'll listen to the BBC. So we could be a massive enabler of that digital transition. So there's lots of things we can do. Education. Why is it only rich kids can get a tutor? Why don't we use AI to absolutely help everyone? These things are hugely beneficial to the creative industries. And, I think we should be tested as part of the Charter, if you like, on that metric, whatever that is, of venture capital power. I really respond to the challenge. That's what I want to do.
I completely get that. Owned by private equity, understand that completely. I think one of your bigger challenges as well.
Slightly, different dynamics, different rewards, Jane. But you're paying for lunch. I'll build society.
Always, Tim. It's interesting. Some of the levers are very similar, even if the structure is slightly different. Let me ask you, so it always strikes me that if you leave this country and land in any other country in the world, and you say as a producer, you make programs for the BBC, people lean forward, they smile, they are very, very responsive. It's a positive response. If you travel to somewhere in the United Kingdom and say the same thing, sometimes you get a slightly less positive response.
Totally.
So what is the problem that we have in this country in celebrating the success of what is seen globally as one of the biggest media assets, biggest media brands, most trusted, to your point, media brands in the world?
Well, the truth is, look, let's be honest about it. We're asking everyone to pay £174.50 in the UK.
They pay a lot more than that in America for their cable.
No, I understand, but it's different when... Now, no one will... on if I want cheering up, I go anywhere and talk about the BBC, and the value of it, to your point, is unique and precious. But it is understandable, and it's one of the joys of our free press, which I would defend, by the way. People always say, aren't you furious about this, that, and the other? I mean, honestly, let's celebrate the fact that people care. I mean, part of what I think is, if I have one small issue on a show, it's front page news. People care about the BBC. My worry is not that, actually. I always use the story of when I'm on a Friday night collapsed in a pub in Oxfordshire, and the 10 people who come to me and give me feedback on Newsnight, I really value them very much at that point. But they're very... One of my neighbours is in the room because he works in this sector, so he's probably... But they come and talk to me, and what's going on, and what are you doing, who's going to host Match Today, blah, blah. The list is quite long. But it's actually the 10 people on the other side of the room who don't care that I worry about, that are disengaged, that we've got to watch that people still trust us, that still want to play the game. And I'm very proud that in coverage of the local elections, all the things we've done, BBC Verify, people are coming into the BBC. We're not excluding anyone. The worry is a mainstream weaponization where people don't care. Yeah, and I worry about that more than I do about people.
I think you can stop worrying. People care massively, don't they? You're right, the negative and the positive. The point is they're engaged. They're invested in the BBC.
I think we should not take that for granted.
No? Okay.
I think institutions are in big trouble if they assume that engagement and there's any degree of talk. I mean, we are absolutely the classic patriarchal broadcast organisation. AI and technology is a huge shift towards a more inclusive... part of the Charter is how do people feel involved in the BBC, but without that being unmanageable, or taken over by special interest groups. These are the kind of debates we're having. What is the future of an institution that is more porous, that's listening to people, that is serving them? I mean, the one great thing about the BBC is we do report without fear or favour. We're reporting, look at our lead story on the security services today. Yeah, we're at the races doing that. As long as we do that, I'm confident, despite all the noise, as long as we're there to serve people, not the other way around in terms of kind of forcing things on them, that is a big cultural change internally in the BBC, by the way. And I say that gently to everyone because I care enormously about the teams, but we're working that really through the leadership, that we're there to serve audiences. And I don't want public service broadcasting trapped in a particular format or a particular tone of voice. I think curiosity is boundless in that, and creativity is boundless. So you get different ideas, you different formats. AI can help with that appropriately while we've got human curation. I mean, most of the people in the BBC are using AI. I have very big kind of ambitions around the media supply chain, different ways in which we can use AI. We're going to be absolutely innovating hard now in partnership with other PSBs, I hope, and critically, we're going to need muscular partnerships with the big American technology companies so we're not left behind on foundational tech. And I think we cannot work without some of those really big guys, and I think we can create co-ventures and create value for us as the UK public in that, in quite a compelling way. So that's a whole different speech, but that's I'm really excited about that.
Yeah, it's good, and thank you. We're up on time. I think ending on muscular partnerships is probably a good place to be. So thank you, Tim. That was fabulous.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Really appreciate it. Thank you.